What if I told you that behind the billions of dollars, behind the stadium lights, behind the screaming fans and the record-breaking charts, there's a boardroom conversation happening inside Hybe that most people will never hear? A conversation where 7 names aren't just listed as artists on a roster, they're treated as irreplaceable pillars holding up an entire entertainment empire. We're not talking about popularity here. We're talking about strategic, cold hard business value that makes corporate executives lose sleep at the thought of ever losing even one of them. But here's the thing, each of these 7 members brings something so wildly different to the table that you can't just swap one for another. So what exactly makes one member a global brand magnet that luxury houses fight over? Why does another member single-handedly keep Hybe's creative credibility alive in ways no producer ever could? Which member turned a solo military era release into a commercial monster that rivaled entire group comebacks? And who is the member that Hybe privately considers their most future-proof investment for the next decade? These aren't fan opinions. These are business realities backed by revenue streams, brand valuations, and strategic positioning that Hybe has built its entire post-IPO survival plan around. 7 members. 7 irreplaceable reasons. From number 7 all the way down to the one asset Hybe guards the most, number 1. Buckle up, because this list is about to change the way you see BTS forever. Let's get into it. Number 7, J-Hope, the man who proved BTS could stand alone and still sell out. You want to know something wild? Before July 2022, the entire K-pop industry operated under one unspoken rule. Solo projects from boy group members are side dishes, not main courses. They're passion projects. They're things you release between group comebacks to keep your name floating around while the real money machine recharges. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected a single BTS member to step out on his own and deliver a full-blown, stadium-grade, commercially dominant solo era that made the entire music industry sit up and say, wait, hold on. This guy alone is an event? But that's exactly what young Hoseok did. And for Hybe, that moment wasn't just exciting, it was a corporate revelation that fundamentally shifted how they valued every single member on their roster. Let's rewind. When BTS announced their extended hiatus in June 2022 and each member began preparing for mandatory military service, the market panicked. Literally. Hybe's stock price dropped. Investors were nervous. Analysts wrote reports questioning whether the company could survive a 2-year gap without their biggest act performing as a group. The fear was real, and it was loud. The general sentiment? BTS is a group phenomenon. Take the group away, and the magic evaporates. J-Hope was the first one to challenge that narrative, and he didn't do it quietly. He did it with Jack in the Box, an album that dropped on July 15, 2022, and immediately signaled to everyone, fans, critics, investors, competitors, that a BTS solo era wasn't going to be some quiet intermission. It was going to be a whole new show. Jack in the Box debuted at number 17 on the Billboard 200. Now, on its own, that number might not sound earth-shattering until you remember the context. This was a hip-hop and pop album released independently by a single member during what everyone assumed would be BTS's quiet period. No group promotion. No synergy with the other 6 members. No massive pre-release hype machine like what you'd see for a full BTS album. Just J-Hope, his music, and his artistry. And it charted higher than most entire groups' career best albums. But here's the moment that Hybe executives probably circled in red ink on their internal reports: Lollapalooza. July 31, 2022. Chicago, Illinois. J-Hope became the first South Korean artist to headline a main stage at a major American music festival. Not a side stage. Not a guest appearance. The main stage. And he didn't just show up and perform, he obliterated it. Over 100,000 people attended Lollapalooza that day, and the footage that came out of that performance went viral globally. The energy, the choreography, the crowd response, it looked like a full-scale BTS concert, except it was one man. The industry reaction was immediate. Billboard covered it extensively. Rolling Stone covered it. Major American media outlets that had previously only discussed BTS as a collective suddenly had to reckon with the fact that the individual members carried massive drawing power on their own. And for HYB, this was pure gold. Why? Because it answered the single biggest existential question hanging over their company: can BTS members generate revenue, attention, and cultural impact individually? J-Hope didn't just answer yes. He answered hell yes. And the financial data backed it up. Jack in the Box moved over 310,000 copies in its first week in South Korea alone. The title track, More, and its follow-up, Arson, both charted on the Billboard Hot 100. His Lollapalooza performance generated an estimated media value in the tens of millions of dollars for HYB, factoring in global press coverage, social media engagement, streaming spikes, and merchandise sales tied to the event. But let's go even deeper, because J-Hope's value to HYB isn't just about one album and one festival. It's about what he represents structurally within the BTS brand. He is the performance anchor. If you've ever watched BTS's live stages, award show performances, or concert DVDs with a careful eye, you'll notice something. J-Hope is almost always positioned as the dance break centerpiece. He's the member whose movements the choreographers build sequences around. He's the one whose energy sets the tempo for the entire group's stage presence. That's not an accident, that's by design. Before BTS, Hoseok trained as a street dancer in Gwangju. He was part of a dance crew called Neuron and won a national dance competition in 2008. When he auditioned for Big Hit Entertainment, the company that would eventually become HYB, he wasn't even auditioning as a rapper or singer. He was a dancer. A pure, raw, technically gifted dancer who happened to also have the charisma and vocal ability to become a performing idol. Bang Si-hyuk, HYB's founder, saw something in him that went beyond dance moves. He saw a performer whose energy was so infectious that it could elevate everyone around him. And that's exactly what J-Hope did for BTS for over a decade. He became the group's on-stage engine. The member who, no matter how tired the group was, no matter how grueling the tour schedule, always brought an intensity to live performance that kept the quality bar impossibly high. From a corporate asset perspective, this is invaluable. In an industry where live performance is a critical revenue stream, concerts, fan meetings, award shows, brand events, having a member who guarantees performance excellence is like having an insurance policy on your product quality. And then there's his mixtape legacy. Before Jack in the Box, J-Hope released Hope World in 2018, a mixtape that debuted at number 63 on the Billboard 200, making him the highest charting Korean solo artist on that chart at the time. Hope World was bright, eclectic, and unapologetically fun, a stark contrast to the heavier, more introspective tones of mixtapes released by RM and Suga. It showed that J-Hope had his own distinct musical identity, one that could attract listeners who might not even be traditional BTS fans. HYB watched those numbers. They watched the streaming data. They watched how Daydream hit over 200 million views on YouTube. And they filed all of it away under one conclusion: young Hoseok is not a supporting player. He's a standalone franchise. Now, here's the part that makes HYB's valuation of J-Hope even more interesting. His military service era only amplified his value. J-Hope enlisted in April 2023, becoming the second BTS member to begin military service. Before enlisting, he released the single On the Street featuring J. Cole, yes, that J. Cole, which debuted at number 60 on the Billboard Hot 100 and signaled that J-Hope had the kind of cross-cultural artistic credibility that allows for genuine Western collaborations, not just token features. A collaboration with J. Cole isn't something that happens because of clout alone. It happens because the other artist respects your craft. And that kind of artistic credibility has long-term brand value that HYB can leverage for years. After completing his service in October 2024, J-Hope returned and immediately demonstrated that his market value hadn't diminished, it had grown. The anticipation for his return was massive, with fans globally counting down the days. His discharge was covered by international media, and his return to public life generated social media engagement numbers that rivaled active comeback periods for most K-pop groups. For Hybe, J-Hope represents something they can point to in every investor meeting, every strategic planning session, every conversation about the company's post-military era future, proof of concept. He was the first domino. The first member to prove that BTS's solo era wouldn't be a liability, but an asset multiplier. Every solo success that came after Jimin's, Jungkook's, Suga's, all of it, was built on the foundation that J-Hope laid when he walked onto that Lollapalooza stage and showed the world that a single member of BTS could command the attention of 100,000 people. That's why he's on this list. That's why he opens it at number 7. Not because he's the least valuable. There is no least valuable when you're talking about irreplaceable assets, but because his specific contribution was the spark that ignited Hybe's entire solo era strategy. Without J-Hope going first and succeeding the way he did, the playbook for every member that followed might have looked completely different. He didn't just prove his own worth. He proved the worth of the entire model. And in a boardroom full of executives trying to figure out how to keep a multi-billion-dollar company alive during a 2-year military hiatus, that man was priceless. So yeah, number 7 on the list, but make no mistake, young Hoseok is a foundational reason Hybe sleeps well at night. Now, you think that's impressive? Wait until you hear what number 6 brings to the table. Because if J-Hope proved that BTS members could stand alone commercially, the next member on this list proved something even harder, that a BTS member could conquer an entirely different dimension of fame that Hybe never even planned for. Curious? You should be. Number 6, Jin, the face that turned military discharge into a global media event. Let's talk about something that no marketing team on earth could have engineered, no PR agency could have scripted, and no amount of money could have bought. On June 12, 2024, Kim Seok-jin walked out of military service, and the entire world stopped scrolling. Not just ARMY. Not just K-pop fans. The entire global entertainment media ecosystem turned its cameras toward one man walking out of a military base in Yongkyeon, South Korea. And what happened next was something Hybe's executives probably still replay in their heads during strategy meetings. Because Jin's military discharge didn't just trend on social media. It became an international news event covered by Reuters, AP, BBC, CNN, and virtually every major global news outlet. A single idol completing mandatory military service, an event that happens to thousands of Korean men every year, became front-page entertainment news worldwide. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because the person walking out of those gates carries a level of public fascination that transcends music, transcends K-pop, and transcends the entertainment industry itself. And that right there is why Hybe considers Kim Seok-jin an asset they literally cannot replicate. Let's break down what makes Jin so uniquely valuable from a corporate perspective, because it's not what most people think. Sure, he's handsome. The man literally trademarked the phrase worldwide handsome and turned it into a global meme that even non-K-pop fans recognize. But if you think Hybe keeps Jin on their priceless asset list because of his looks, you're missing the entire picture. Jin's real value lies in something far more rare and far more difficult to manufacture: cultural penetration through personality. In an industry full of meticulously trained, carefully managed, image-conscious idols, Jin is the member who built his brand on being uncontrollably, authentically, hilariously himself. His dad jokes aren't scripted. His chaotic energy on variety shows isn't an act. His tendency to break the fourth wall during interviews, to make BTS members crack up during serious moments, to turn award show acceptance speeches into comedy bits, all of it is genuine. And that genuineness created something that Hybe's marketing department could never have designed on a whiteboard, a parasocial connection with the global audience that operates on a completely different frequency than traditional idol worship. People don't just admire Jin. They feel like they know him. They feel like he's the funny older brother, the guy at the party who makes everyone comfortable, the person who walks into a tense room and immediately lightens the mood. That kind of emotional connection is marketing gold, and Hybe knows it. But let's talk numbers, because Jin's value isn't just vibes and personality, it's commercial performance that consistently defies expectations. In October 2022, just weeks before enlisting in the military, Jin released The Astronaut, a single co-written with Coldplay. Let that collaboration sink in for a second. Coldplay, one of the biggest rock bands in the history of music, a group that has sold over 100 million albums worldwide, personally collaborated with Jin on a track. Chris Martin didn't just lend his name to the project. He co-wrote the song and performed it live with Jin at Coldplay's concert in Buenos Aires, Argentina, on October 28, 2022. That performance, in front of over 70,000 people at River Plate Stadium, was Jin's farewell stage before military enlistment. And it was devastating. The emotion in that stadium was palpable, fans crying, Jin visibly holding back tears, Chris Martin introducing him with genuine warmth and respect. The video of that performance went viral instantly, racking up tens of millions of views across platforms. The Astronaut debuted at number 51 on the Billboard Hot 100, but its commercial impact went far beyond chart positions. The single sold over 700,000 copies in South Korea in its first week. It topped iTunes charts in over 90 countries. The music video surpassed 100 million views on YouTube. And here's the kicker. This was a pre-enlistment release with zero traditional promotional cycle. No music show appearances. No variety show rounds. No weeks-long comeback schedule. Jin released the song, performed it once live with Coldplay, and then disappeared into military service for 18 months. And it still sold hundreds of thousands of copies. For Hybe, that data point is extraordinary. It means Jin's commercial pulling power operates independently of promotional infrastructure. His fans don't need to be reminded to buy, they show up regardless. That kind of automatic commercial loyalty is the kind of thing companies spend billions trying to build through brand marketing, and Jin generates it organically. Now let's talk about what happened after the military. Because this is where Hybe's valuation of Jin gets really interesting. When Jin was discharged on June 12, 2024, he didn't just come back to the entertainment world quietly. He came back and immediately demonstrated that his public appeal had not only survived 18 months of absence, it had intensified. The discharge event itself was a spectacle. All 6 remaining BTS members showed up to greet him, creating an emotional reunion that was live-streamed and watched by millions globally. The images from that day, Jin in his military uniform being embraced by his members, the laughter, the tears, the camaraderie, dominated social media for days. It was organic content that generated more engagement than most companies' entire annual marketing budgets. Within weeks of his discharge, Jin was everywhere. He appeared on variety shows, hosted fan events, and launched solo activities that showed he'd been planning and preparing even while serving. His variety show presence, in particular, was a strategic asset that Hybe leveraged brilliantly. Jin's natural comedic timing and unfiltered personality made him the perfect variety show guest, the kind of entertainer that Korean TV producers fight to book because he guarantees ratings. His appearance on shows generated viral moments that trended across Korean and international social media, keeping BTS in the public conversation during a period when the group wasn't yet reunited. But here's the deeper strategic layer that most fans don't see. Jin represents something crucial for Hybe's long-term brand diversification strategy, crossover appeal beyond music. The entertainment industry in Korea has been increasingly converging music and acting, with idol actors becoming a major revenue stream through K-drama casting, film roles, and brand endorsement deals tied to on-screen visibility. Jin, with his degree in film and acting from Konkuk University, his natural screen presence, and his massive individual brand recognition, is perfectly positioned for this crossover. Hybe isn't just looking at Jin as a musician. They're looking at him as a potential multimedia franchise, someone who can anchor variety shows, take on acting roles, lead brand campaigns, and maintain a solo music career simultaneously. That multi-platform versatility is rare even among the most successful idols, and it gives Hybe multiple revenue channels tied to a single artist. And then there's the brand endorsement dimension. Jin's visual impact, yes, the face that launched 1,000 memes, is a genuine commercial asset in the luxury and lifestyle brand market. His visuals have been compared to classic Korean beauty standards in ways that resonate deeply with both domestic and international luxury brands looking for Asian market ambassadors. Every time Jin appears at a public event, the outfit he wears sells out. Every skincare product associated with him sees demand spikes. Every brand that partners with him sees measurable returns on their investment. For Hybe, which takes a management cut of all endorsement deals, Jin's brand appeal is a reliable, ongoing revenue stream that doesn't require album releases or concert tours to activate. Let's also talk about something that doesn't show up in financial reports, but matters enormously in the entertainment business: emotional anchor value. Within BTS's internal dynamics, Jin has always been the eldest member, and he's carried that role with a specific kind of grace that shapes the group's public identity. He's the member who cried during their 2018 Mama speech while thanking the others for keeping the group together. He's the member who, despite being the oldest, never pulled rank and instead became known for being the most playful and approachable. He's the member who enlisted first, setting the tone for how the entire group would handle military service, with dignity, without drama, and with a promise to return. That emotional narrative is part of BTS's brand equity, and Jin is a central character in it. When Hybe tells the BTS story to investors, to partners, to potential collaborators, Jin's role as the selfless eldest who leads by example is a narrative asset that adds depth and emotional resonance to the brand. It makes BTS more than a pop group. It makes them a story people are invested in. And stories sell. They sell albums, concert tickets, merchandise, documentaries, and brand partnerships in ways that pure musical output alone cannot. Number 5. Suga, the shadow architect whose music literally built Hybe's creative empire. Here's a question that will fundamentally change how you look at BTS's entire discography. When you listen to Dynamite, when you blast Butter in your car, when you cry to Life Goes On, when you feel the raw power of Interlude, Shadow, do you ever stop and think about who actually built the sonic DNA behind those moments? Because here's the thing most casual listeners don't realize, and even a lot of dedicated fans don't fully appreciate: Min Youngie, the man you know as Suga, the man who also operates under the alias Auguste, has production and songwriting credits on over 100 songs in BTS's catalog. Let me say that again. Over 100 songs. We're not talking about token credits where someone changes one word in a lyric and gets their name on the liner notes. We're talking about deep, foundational, hands on the mixing board, building beats from scratch, writing entire verses at 3 a.m. level involvement in the music that turned BTS from a struggling underdog group into the biggest act on the planet. And for Hybe, that makes Min Youngie something far more valuable than a performer. It makes him an intellectual property engine, a human being who literally generates the creative assets that the entire company monetizes. In the music business, there's a critical distinction between artists who perform content and artists who create content. Performers are valuable, absolutely. They bring charisma, stage presence, vocal ability, and fan connection to the table. But creators? Creators are the ones who own the underlying intellectual property. They're the ones whose names appear on publishing rights, who collect royalties every single time a song is streamed, synced in a commercial, played on radio, or covered by another artist. And in Hybe's portfolio, Suga is one of the most prolific creators they have, not just within BTS, but across their entire multi-label roster. Let's trace this back to the beginning, because Suga's creative journey didn't start when BTS debuted in 2013. It started years earlier, in Daegu, South Korea, where a teenager named Min Youngie was producing beats in underground hip-hop circles, performing under the name Gloss, and building a reputation in the Korean underground rap scene that had nothing to do with idol culture. He was part of the D-Town crew. He won second place in a local rap competition. He was producing tracks on equipment so basic that he later described his early studio setup as being barely functional. But the music he made was raw, honest, and technically sophisticated in ways that caught the attention of Bang Si-hyuk, who was then running a small, nearly bankrupt entertainment company called Big Hit. When Youngie joined Big Hit as a trainee, he didn't come in as someone who needed to be taught how to make music. He came in as someone who already knew, and that changed the entire creative dynamic of what would eventually become BTS. From the very first BTS album, Too Cool for School, in 2013, Suga's fingerprints were on the music. He co-produced tracks, wrote rap verses, and contributed to the thematic direction of the album. As BTS evolved through their discography, from the School trilogy to the HYYH era to Wings to Love Yourself to Map of the Soul, Suga's production role grew exponentially. By the time BTS was releasing albums that were topping the Billboard 200 and breaking global records, Suga wasn't just a contributor to the music, he was one of its primary architects. Tracks like Interlude, Shadow from Map of the Soul, 7 showcase his production philosophy perfectly. That song is dark, layered, introspective, and technically complex, built on distorted bass, atmospheric synths, and a vocal delivery that shifts between rapping and almost screaming. It's the kind of track that sounds like it came from a dedicated album artist's studio, not from a member of a pop group. And that duality, the ability to create music that satisfies both mainstream pop sensibilities and underground artistic credibility, is what makes Suga's creative output so uniquely valuable to HYB. He gives BTS depth. He gives their discography a creative legitimacy that protects the brand from the most damaging criticism any pop act can face, the accusation that they're manufactured. Because when you have a member who produces his own music, writes his own lyrics about depression, mental health, societal pressure, and personal demons with the kind of unflinching honesty that Youngie brings, you can't call that manufactured. You just can't. And that authenticity is a brand shield that has saved BTS's reputation more times than most people realize. But let's talk about the August D trilogy, because this is where HYB's valuation of Suga goes from impressive to absolutely staggering. Between 2016 and 2023, Suga released 3 solo projects under the name August D, the self-titled August D mixtape in 2016, D2 in 2020, and the full studio album D-Day in 2023. Together, these 3 projects form a narrative trilogy that traces Youngie's personal journey from underground rapper to global superstar, from mental health struggles to self-acceptance, from anger to peace. And from a commercial standpoint, the trilogy's performance was extraordinary. D-Day, released on April 21, 2023, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, the highest chart position for a Korean solo artist in history at that time. Number 2. On the Billboard 200. As a solo artist. From a genre that blended hip-hop, rock, pop, and experimental sounds in ways that defied easy categorization. The album sold over 2 million copies in South Korea alone within its first month. The lead single Hybe charted on the Billboard Hot 100. The music video for Hybe surpassed 100 million views on YouTube. Every metric you could use to evaluate commercial success, chart positions, sales volume, streaming numbers, video views, D-Day delivered at a level that most solo artists from any country would consider career-defining. And then came the tour. The D-Day World Tour, which ran from April to August 2023, was a revelation. Suga performed in major venues across Asia, the United States, and beyond, including sold-out shows at iconic locations like the UBS Arena in New York, the United Center in Chicago, and multiple dates at Seoul's KSPO Dome. The tour grossed tens of millions of dollars and demonstrated something that HYB took very seriously. Suga could fill arenas by himself, with his own music, performing a show that was entirely his own artistic vision. That's not just a solo activity. That's an independent revenue-generating machine. But here's where it gets even more strategically significant for HYB. Suga's value as a producer extends beyond BTS's own catalog. He has production credits for other artists, and his reputation as a songwriter and producer gives HYB credibility in conversations about artistic development across their entire label ecosystem. When HYB acquires new labels, develops new groups, or pitches their creative capabilities to potential partners. Having Min Youngi on their roster is like having a Michelin star chef in your restaurant group, even if he's not cooking in every kitchen. His presence elevates the perceived quality of the entire operation. The publishing rights alone tied to Suga's songwriting catalog represent a significant financial asset for Hybe. Every song he's written or co-produced generates ongoing royalty income through streaming, radio play, sync licensing, and mechanical reproduction. Over a career spanning more than a decade with hundreds of credits, that catalog has accumulated into a revenue stream that will continue generating income for years, potentially decades, regardless of whether Suga is actively promoting new music. In the music industry, catalogs are gold. They're the reason major labels spend billions acquiring publishing rights. And Suga has been building Hybe's catalog from the inside, one track at a time, since 2013. There's also a dimension of Suga's value that operates on a deeply personal, almost philosophical level, his openness about mental health. In an industry and a culture where mental health discussions were historically stigmatized, Suga has been consistently and courageously open about his struggles with depression, social anxiety, and the pressures of fame. His lyrics address these topics with a rawness that resonates with millions of listeners worldwide. Songs like The Last from the original August D mixtape contain lines about obsessive-compulsive disorder, depression, and suicidal thoughts that were shocking in their honesty when they were released. That openness did something remarkable for BTS's brand. It gave them moral authority. When BTS partnered with UNICEF for the Love Myself anti-violence campaign, when RM spoke at the United Nations General Assembly about self-love and mental health, those initiatives carried genuine weight because the members, and Suga in particular, had already demonstrated personal vulnerability on these topics through their music. For Hybe, that moral authority translates into partnership opportunities with global organizations. Number 4, RM, the leader who put BTS in the United Nations and made the world listen. Let me paint a picture for you. September 24th, 2018. New York City. The United Nations General Assembly Hall, the same room where presidents, prime ministers, and heads of state deliver speeches that shape global policy. The same room where the Cuban Missile Crisis was debated, where Nelson Mandela addressed the world, where the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. And on that day, standing at that podium, in front of delegates from 193 member nations, was a 24-year-old rapper from Ilsan, South Korea, named Kim Namjoon. Not a politician. Not a diplomat. Not an academic or a humanitarian leader with decades of institutional credentials. A K-pop idol. And he didn't just stand there as decoration or read a corporate script written by a PR team. He delivered a speech, in English, fluently, with conviction and vulnerability, about self-love, about the pressures young people face, about the importance of speaking your truth even when the world tells you to be quiet. He told the United Nations, "I had many faults and I have many more fears, but I'm going to embrace myself as hard as I can. And I'm starting to love myself gradually, just little by little." The room was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of confusion, but the heavy silence of people genuinely listening. And when he finished, the applause was real. Not polite, diplomatic clapping, real, genuine recognition that something meaningful had just been said by someone who had every right to say it. That moment didn't just change BTS's public perception. It changed the perception of what a pop artist could be, what a K-pop group could represent, and what Hybe's most prized asset was truly capable of. And for Hybe's executives, watching from whatever screen they were glued to that day, it was the moment they fully understood that Kim Namjoon was not just BTS's leader in the way that K-pop groups have designated leaders. He was BTS's ambassador to the world, a living, breathing bridge between pop culture and institutional legitimacy that no amount of marketing spend could ever create artificially. Let's talk about why that matters so much from a corporate strategy perspective. In the entertainment industry, there's a ceiling that almost every pop act eventually hits, the credibility ceiling. You can sell millions of albums, sell out stadiums, dominate charts, and accumulate billions of streams. But at some point, the mainstream establishment, the cultural critics, the academic institutions, the governmental bodies, the legacy media will look at you and ask, but is this serious? Is this art? Does this matter beyond entertainment? That question has destroyed the long-term legacies of countless pop acts. It's the reason why massively successful artists can dominate their era and then be forgotten within a decade, while less commercially successful artists with perceived cultural depth remain in the conversation for generations. BTS needed someone who could answer that question convincingly. They needed someone who could sit in a room with intellectuals, journalists, world leaders, and cultural gatekeepers and hold his own, not through rehearsed talking points, but through genuine knowledge, curiosity, and intellectual engagement. Kim Namjoon is that person, and it's not an act. The man has an IQ of 148, documented, tested, verified. He taught himself English by watching the American sitcom Friends with Korean subtitles as a teenager. He didn't just learn conversational English, he learned it well enough to give extemporaneous speeches at the United Nations, conduct full interviews with American media without a translator, and engage in nuanced philosophical discussions about art, identity, and society with Western journalists who were clearly expecting to encounter a language barrier and instead found themselves in a conversation with someone more articulate than most native speakers they interview. But RM's intellectual value to Hybe goes far beyond language skills. It's about the way he positions BTS and, by extension, Hybe within a cultural framework that elevates the brand above pure pop commerce. Take his passion for visual art. RM is a serious, knowledgeable art collector and museum enthusiast whose engagement with the contemporary art world isn't a hobby or a PR strategy. It's a genuine intellectual pursuit that has opened entirely new doors for BTS's brand identity. He regularly visits museums and galleries around the world, documenting his experiences on social media in ways that have actually measurably increased foot traffic to the institutions he visits. The RM effect on museums became a documented phenomenon when RM posted about visiting a particular gallery or exhibition. Attendance at that location would spike noticeably in the following days and weeks as fans followed his cultural footsteps. This isn't just cute fan behavior. From Hybe's perspective, it's evidence that RM has the ability to influence his audience's cultural consumption patterns in ways that extend far beyond music. He's not just selling albums, he's shaping taste. And that kind of cultural influence is extraordinarily valuable to luxury brands, cultural institutions, and organizations looking for ambassadors who bring genuine credibility rather than just follower counts. Now let's talk about his solo music, because this is where RM's artistic identity becomes a direct revenue and brand asset for Hybe. In December 2022, RM released Indigo, his debut solo studio album, and it was a statement. Not a pop statement. Not a commercial play designed to maximize streams. It was an art statement, a deeply personal, genre-fluid album that featured collaborations with artists like Erykah Badu, Anderson .Paak, Eugene of Cherry Filter, and Kim Sae-wol. Read that feature list again. Erykah Badu, Anderson .Paak. These aren't names you see on typical K-pop solo debuts. These are artists with deep roots in R&B, soul, neo-soul, and alternative music, artists whose participation signals something specific about the project. This is real music, made by a real artist, with real artistic vision. Indigo debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Number 3. For an album that was decidedly not commercial pop, that featured extended instrumental passages, philosophical lyrics about mortality and identity, and collaborations with artists most mainstream pop listeners had never heard of. That chart performance told Hybe something crucial. RM's audience doesn't just follow him blindly. They trust his artistic judgment enough to follow him into unfamiliar sonic territory. That trust is an asset that Hybe can leverage for long-term catalog building. Albums like Indigo don't have the explosive first-week sales spikes of pure pop releases, but they have longevity. They're the kind of albums that people discover years later, that get featured in Best Albums of the Decade lists, that accumulate streams slowly and steadily over time. They're catalog assets, not single-cycle products. And then came Right Place, Wrong Person in May 2024, RM's second solo album, released while other members were in military service. This album pushed even further into alternative and indie rock territory, with production choices that were openly experimental and lyrics that grappled with the existential dislocation of being a global superstar who still feels fundamentally out of place. The album debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and received critical acclaim from publications that don't typically cover K-pop, Pitchfork, and The Guardian. When Pitchfork reviews your album favorably, you've crossed a credibility threshold that most pop artists never reach. For Hybe, that critical legitimacy isn't just nice to have, it's strategically essential. It protects BTS from the narrative that they're a manufactured pop phenomenon that will age poorly. It ensures that when the history of 21st century popular music is written, BTS will be discussed as artists, not just as a commercial phenomenon. And the person most responsible for building that critical legacy? Namjoon. But let's circle back to the geopolitical dimension, because this is truly where RM's value becomes irreplaceable. After that first UN speech in 2018, RM returned to the United Nations multiple times. In September 2021, BTS appeared at the UN General Assembly again, this time as special presidential envoys for future generations and culture, appointed by the South Korean government. They performed at the UN, they participated in diplomatic events, and RM once again served as the group's primary English language spokesperson. That appointment, Special Presidential Envoys, isn't a ceremonial title. It's a diplomatic designation that reflects the South Korean government's recognition of BTS's soft power value and RM's role as the articulate, intelligent, globally fluent face of that soft power. For Hybe, this geopolitical connection has enormous strategic implications. It positions the company not just as an entertainment label, but as a participant in South Korea's cultural diplomacy infrastructure. Number 3, the human brand whose face alone moves billion-dollar industries. Let me ask you something. What do you call a person who walks into a room, no, scratch that, who walks past a camera for 3 seconds, and the next morning, the jacket he was wearing is sold out in 17 countries, the sunglasses on his face crash the brand's website, the hairstyle he debuted becomes the most requested look in salons from Seoul to Sao Paulo, and the paparazzi photos from that single moment generate more engagement than the official marketing campaigns of Fortune 500 companies. What do you call that? You call it Taehyung. You call it V. And Hybe calls it one of the most valuable individual brand assets in the entire global entertainment industry, not just in K-pop, not just in Asia, but globally. Let's get something straight right from the start. When we talk about V's value to Hybe, we're not talking about the same kind of value we discussed with Suga's production genius or RM's intellectual diplomacy. We're talking about something more primal, more visceral, and in many ways more commercially powerful, the ability to generate desire. The ability to make people want the product, want the experience, want the aesthetic, want to look, to watch, to follow, to consume. That kind of magnetic commercial gravity is something that the fashion industry, the luxury goods market, and the global advertising ecosystem spend hundreds of billions of dollars annually trying to manufacture through campaigns, influencers, and brand strategies. And Taehyung generates it by existing. Let me hit you with the facts, because V's brand impact isn't subjective fan hype. It's documented, measured, and tracked by some of the most sophisticated market analysis firms in the world. In 2021, 2022, and 2023, V was consistently ranked among the top individual brand reputation rankings for K-pop idols by the Korean Business Research Institute. But that domestic metric barely scratches the surface of what's happening internationally. V has been named most handsome face in the world by TC Candler's annual list multiple times. Now, you might dismiss that as a popularity contest, but here's what matters. That designation generates massive media coverage globally, and every article, every social media post, every TV segment that discusses it includes V's name, V's face, and by extension, BTS and Hybe. It's free, recurring, global media exposure tied to a single member's visual identity. The dollar value of that earned media, calculated across all global markets, runs into the hundreds of millions over time. But the real game, the one that makes Hybe's finance team pay very close attention, is the luxury fashion partnership ecosystem. In August 2022, CELINE announced Kim Taehyung as their global ambassador. Not a regional ambassador. Not a campaign model. The global ambassador for one of the most prestigious luxury houses in the LVMH portfolio. CELINE, under creative director CELINE, a man legendary for his selective, meticulous, almost obsessive control over his brand's aesthetic, personally chose V to represent the house. CELINE doesn't pick ambassadors based on follower counts. He picks them based on a very specific visual and cultural alignment with his artistic vision. The fact that he looked at the entire global landscape of celebrities, models, actors, musicians, and cultural figures and chose Kim Taehyung tells you something that no amount of streaming data ever could. V possesses a visual and aesthetic presence that operates at the highest tier of global cultural relevance. The commercial impact was immediate and measurable. When V attended CELINE's fashion shows, the media coverage dwarfed that of other celebrity attendees. When he wore CELINE pieces in airport photos or social media posts, the items sold out within hours, a phenomenon the fashion industry calls the Taehyung effect, and yes, that's a real term used in actual industry analysis reports. One study estimated that V's association with CELINE generated over $100 million in media impact value within the first year of the partnership alone. $100 million. From one person wearing clothes. For Hybe, which negotiates and manages these brand partnerships on behalf of their artists, V's fashion industry value is a revenue stream that operates almost entirely independently of music releases. He doesn't need to drop an album for CELINE to pay premium rates for his association. He doesn't need to be on tour for Cartier, Moncler, or other luxury brands to seek him out for collaborations and events. His brand value regenerates itself through the simple mechanism of public appearance. Every time Kim Taehyung is photographed, every time he steps onto a red carpet, every time he posts on social media. Value is created for every brand associated with him. That's a perpetual revenue engine, and Hybe knows exactly how rare and how precious that is. But here's where people make the mistake of reducing V to just a pretty face, and that's where they fundamentally misunderstand both the man and the asset. Because Kim Taehyung's appeal isn't just visual, it's atmospheric. He projects an aura that industry professionals struggle to articulate but immediately recognize. There's a quality to his presence, in music videos, in live performances, in interviews, in candid moments, that combines vulnerability, intensity, playfulness, and mystery in a way that keeps people watching. He's the member that non-fans most frequently point to as their gateway into BTS. He's the viral moment generator. He's the one whose brief expressions during performances become GIFs that circulate across the internet for years. Remember the 2016 Blood, Sweat, and Tears music video? V scene. The one where he's blindfolded, the one with the Renaissance painting aesthetic, the one that looks like it was pulled from a Caravaggio canvas, became one of the most iconic visual moments in K-pop history. That single sequence has been analyzed in video essays, referenced in academic papers about K-pop aesthetics, and cited by visual artists as inspiration. One music video scene. From one member. Still generating cultural conversation nearly a decade later. That's the kind of lasting visual impact that advertising agencies would spend millions trying to create for a single campaign, and V generates it as a natural byproduct of his artistic participation. Now let's talk about Layover, because V's solo music debut revealed yet another dimension of his value to Hybe. Released on September 8, 2023, Layover was not what anyone expected from a BTS member's solo album. It wasn't hip-hop. It wasn't dance pop. It wasn't even the kind of polished, high-energy K-pop that dominates charts. It was a jazz-influenced, R&B-tinged, deliberately minimalist album that sounded like late-night cocktail music, smooth, melancholic, and drenched in an atmosphere of romantic longing. The title track, Slow Dancing, and the pre-release single, Love Me Again, established an artistic identity for V that was completely distinct from any other BTS member. While Jimin was delivering high-energy pop, while Jungkook was chasing global dance hits, V went in the opposite direction. He went quiet. He went intimate. He went artistic. And the market responded. Layover debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, selling over 2 million copies in South Korea within its first weeks. The album topped iTunes charts in over 100 countries. Slow Dancing charted on the Billboard Hot 100 and accumulated hundreds of millions of streams across platforms. But beyond the raw numbers, Layover did something strategically brilliant for V's brand and, by extension, for HYB's portfolio diversification. It carved out a niche for V in the adult contemporary and jazz pop space, a market segment that is less volatile than mainstream pop, attracts a demographic with higher spending power, and aligns perfectly with the luxury brand partnerships that already define V's commercial identity. A CELINE ambassador who makes jazz-tinged R&B? That's not just musically interesting, it's brand synergy at its most elegant. The audience that listens to Slow Dancing on repeat is the same audience that shops at CELINE, visits art galleries, and subscribes to the kind of aesthetic lifestyle that luxury brands sell. HYB didn't plan that convergence. V created it organically through his genuine artistic preferences, but you can bet they recognized its commercial potential immediately. Let's also discuss V's acting potential, because this is a dimension of his value that HYB has been strategically nurturing and that represents one of the most significant untapped revenue opportunities in their entire portfolio. V made his acting debut in the 2016 KBS historical drama, Hwarang, The Poet Warrior Youth, where he played the character Hansung. Despite being a first-time actor with no formal drama training, his performance was widely praised by viewers and critics alike. His emotional range in the role, particularly in the character's later dramatic scenes, demonstrated a natural screen presence that surprised even industry professionals who expected idol acting to be stiff and superficial. Since Hwarang, the K-drama. Number 2, Jimin, the solo phenomenon who conquered Billboard's number 1 and rewrote history. March 24, 2023. Remember that date. Write it down. Tattoo it on your memory. Because on that date, something happened on the Billboard Hot 100 chart that had never happened before in the 65-year history of that chart's existence. A Korean solo artist, not a group, not a collaboration, not a feature with an established Western act, a single Korean solo artist debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 with a song called Like Crazy. And the name attached to that record-breaking achievement was Park Jimin. Not BTS. Not BTS featuring Jimin. Just Jimin. One name. One artist. One song. Number 1. In the history of the Billboard Hot 100, a chart that has tracked the most popular songs in the United States since 1958, a chart that has been topped by Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Beyoncé, Drake, Taylor Swift. No Korean solo artist had ever reached that summit. Groups had gotten close. BTS as a group had hit number 1 multiple times. But a solo Korean artist? Never. Until Jimin walked in and did it on his very first solo attempt. Let that sink in. His first solo album. His first solo single cycle. His first time stepping out without the BTS name on the marquee. And he went straight to number 1. For HYB, the phone calls that morning must have been electric. Because, like Crazy, debuting at number 1 wasn't just a milestone for Jimin, it was a proof point worth billions of dollars in projected future revenue. It proved, with the most irrefutable metric in the American music industry, that a BTS member could not just compete but dominate the solo market at the highest possible level. Every investor presentation HYB gave after that date included that data point. Every negotiation with streaming platforms, brand partners, and distribution deals was strengthened by it. Every strategic projection about the company's solo-era revenue potential was validated by those 2 words on the Billboard chart, number 1. But let's rewind, because the story of how Park Jimin became the most commercially explosive solo act in K-pop history doesn't start with Like Crazy. It starts with a kid from Busan who trained in contemporary dance at Busan High School of Arts, who was the last member to join BTS's trainee lineup, who almost didn't make the final group, and who turned that underdog origin story into fuel for the most relentless pursuit of perfection the K-pop industry has ever seen. Jimin's signature within BTS was always duality, the ability to switch between ethereal softness and explosive intensity within a single performance, sometimes within a single breath. His contemporary dance background gave him a movement vocabulary that was fundamentally different from the other members. While J-Hope brought street dance precision and V brought theatrical expressiveness, Jimin brought fluidity, a boneless, gravity-defying quality to his movement that made choreographers design entire sequences around his body's capabilities. His solo dance breaks in BTS performances, the one in Fake Love, the one in Black Swan, the blindfolded sequence in Filter, these weren't just impressive choreography. They were moments of genuine artistry that elevated BTS's live shows from pop concerts to performance art events. And HYB's concert revenue data tells a clear story. The performances featuring Jimin's dance showcases consistently generated the highest audience response metrics, the most social media clips, and the most post-concert discussion online. He was, and remains, the member whose live performance moments are most likely to go viral and drive ticket demand for the next show. But Jimin's value to HYB extends far beyond dance. His vocal color, that distinctive, high-register, emotionally saturated tone that can sound like silk being torn, is one of the most recognizable vocal signatures in global pop music. Songs like Serendipity, Lie, Filter, and Friends showcase a voice that isn't technically conventional by traditional vocal standards, but is emotionally devastating in its impact. When Jimin sings, you don't evaluate his technique, you feel something. That emotional transmission through vocal performance is extraordinarily rare and commercially invaluable because it creates the kind of deep listener attachment that drives repeat streams, album purchases, and concert attendance. Now let's talk about Face, because this album is where Jimin's solo value crystallized into hard commercial data that HYB could take to the bank. Released on March 24, 2023, Face was Jimin's debut solo album, and its performance was nothing short of historic. Beyond Like Crazy, hitting #1 on the Hot 100, the album itself debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200. It sold over 2 million copies in South Korea within its first week, making it one of the fastest-selling solo albums in Korean music history. Every single track on the album charted on the Billboard Hot 100 simultaneously, a feat that demonstrated not just the popularity of the lead single, but the depth of fan engagement with the entire project. The pre-release track, Set Me Free PT2, had already generated massive buzz before the album dropped, with its music video showcasing Jimin's dance artistry in a visually stunning, emotionally raw performance that accumulated over 100 million views on YouTube. The song itself charted on the Hot 100, setting up the album's commercial momentum before Like Crazy even released. And Like Crazy, let's talk about that song specifically, because its success reveals something important about Jimin's commercial appeal. The song exists in two versions, a Korean version and an English version. The English version was the one that charted at #1, and its sound was deliberately positioned in the Western pop dance space, with a driving beat, catchy melodic hook, and vocal processing that made it feel right at home alongside tracks by The Weeknd, Dua Lipa, and other global pop stars dominating American radio at the time. That sonic positioning was strategic, and it worked flawlessly. Like Crazy didn't feel like a K-pop song being pushed into the American market. It felt like a global pop song made by a global pop star who happened to be Korean. That distinction matters enormously for HYB's international expansion strategy. It means Jimin can penetrate Western markets not as a niche import, but as a mainstream competitor, opening revenue channels in touring, brand partnerships, and media opportunities that are typically closed to non-English language artists. The financial implications of Face for HYB were staggering. Album sales revenue. Streaming royalties from billions of cumulative streams. Music video advertising revenue. Merchandise tied to the album cycle. Brand partnership deals activated around the comeback. Concert and fan meeting revenue from solo promotional events. Conservative estimates put the direct revenue generated by Face and its associated activities in the hundreds of millions of dollars from a single album by a single artist in a single release cycle. And then Jimin did it again. On July 19, 2024, he released Muse, his second solo album, and proved that Face wasn't a one-time lightning strike. Muse debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The lead single, who became a global hit, charting in the top 15 on the Billboard Hot 100 and becoming one of the most streamed songs of the summer across all platforms. Who wasn't just commercially successful, it was a cultural moment. The song's bright, infectious, retro pop energy made it a TikTok phenomenon, with the choreography going viral and generating millions of user-created videos worldwide. The Who Challenge became one of the biggest dance challenges of 2024, introducing Jimin's music to audiences who had never engaged with BTS or K-pop before. For Hybe, that kind of organic viral penetration into mainstream global culture is the holy grail of music marketing. And Jimin achieved it without the massive advertising spend that Western labels typically deploy to manufacture viral moments. The commercial performance of Muse confirms something that Face had strongly suggested: Jimin has sustainable, repeatable solo commercial power. He's not a one-album wonder. He's not riding the residual momentum of BTS's group popularity. He has built, through his artistry and his connection with a massive global audience, a solo career infrastructure that can generate blockbuster-level results album after album. That repeatability is what makes Hybe's internal valuation of Jimin so extraordinarily high. In the music industry, many artists can have one hit, one successful album, one viral moment. Very few can replicate that success consistently. Jimin has now demonstrated a pattern. Debut solo album goes to the top of global charts. Second solo album goes to the top of global charts. Singles from both albums penetrate mainstream consciousness. Each release cycle generates hundreds of millions in revenue. That pattern makes him one of the most bankable solo acts in global music, regardless of genre or nationality. Number 1, Jungkook, the golden magne who became Hybe's most future-proof global weapon. There's a reason they call him the golden magne. There's a reason that nickname has survived since he was 15 years old, since the day he walked into big hit entertainment as a shy, quiet kid from Busan who could barely make eye contact during his audition, and there's a reason that, over a decade later, that nickname isn't just a fan term anymore. It's a business descriptor. Because Jungkook is, by every measurable metric the entertainment industry has ever devised, the single most complete, most globally dominant, most commercially devastating individual artist asset that Hybe has ever had on their roster. And when I say every metric, I mean every metric. Streaming numbers? He holds them. Chart records? He broke them. Solo debut performance? He obliterated expectations. Global cultural penetration? He reached audiences that no Korean artist, solo, or group had ever reached before. Brand value? The numbers are so large they barely fit in standard financial projections. Future growth trajectory? Hybe's internal models project him as their most valuable long-term investment for the next decade and beyond. This isn't hype. This isn't fan bias dressed up as analysis. This is what the data says. And the data says that Jungkook is, quite simply, the most valuable individual human asset in Hybe's entire corporate portfolio. Let's start with the moment that changed everything, the moment that made Hybe's executives look at each other across a conference table and realize they weren't just managing a talented artist. They were managing a global phenomenon that was about to redefine what a K-pop solo career could look like. July 14, 2023. 7 featuring Lotto. The song dropped, and within 24 hours, the music industry was in shock. 7 debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. But that headline alone doesn't capture the magnitude of what happened. The song accumulated over 15 million streams on Spotify in its first day, shattering the record for the biggest single-day streams for a song debut on the platform at that time. It wasn't just number one in the United States. It topped charts in over 100 countries simultaneously. It was the number one song on the global Spotify chart, the global Apple Music chart, the global YouTube Music chart. It was number one everywhere, all at once. In a way that made the entire music industry sit up and pay attention to a level of global commercial dominance that even the biggest Western pop stars rarely achieve with a single release. And Jungkook did it with what was essentially a pre-album single. Not the lead track from a major album rollout. Not a song backed by months of promotional buildup. A standalone single, released as a teaser for his upcoming solo album, performed with the casual confidence of an artist who absolutely knew, that whatever he put out, the world would listen. The streaming records 7 set were staggering. It became the fastest song in Spotify history to reach 100 million streams. It held the number one position on the Spotify Global Top 50 for multiple weeks. It accumulated over 1 billion streams on Spotify alone, making Jungkook one of the fastest Korean artists to reach that milestone with a single track. On YouTube, the music video surpassed 100 million views faster than virtually any solo artist release in history. On TikTok, the song spawned a dance challenge that generated billions of views across the platform, with everyone from casual users to major celebrities participating. The cultural penetration was total and immediate. 7 wasn't a K-pop hit that crossed over. It was a global pop hit that happened to be by a Korean artist, and that distinction is crucial for understanding why Hybe values Jungkook the way they do. But 7 was just the opening move. On September 29, 2023, Jungkook appeared as a performer at the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 opening ceremony. Wait, let me correct the timeline and give you the full picture. Let's rewind even further, because Jungkook's global moment actually began at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. On November 20th, 2022, Jungkook performed Dreamers at the opening ceremony of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, the most watched sporting event on the planet, with an estimated global television audience of over 3 billion people. 3 billion people. Let that number settle in your mind. No concert venue on Earth holds 3 billion people. No streaming platform reaches 3 billion simultaneous viewers. No marketing campaign in history has ever delivered 3 billion impressions in a single moment. And Jungkook stood on that stage, in Al Bayt Stadium, and performed in front of all of them. Dreamers became a massive hit, charting globally and becoming the unofficial anthem of the tournament. The performance footage was replayed and shared billions of times across social media. And the brand exposure for Hybe, having their artist perform at the single largest entertainment event in the world, was worth an estimated media value that industry analysts struggled to quantify because the numbers were so enormous they seemed theoretical. That World Cup performance did something that years of traditional marketing couldn't have achieved. It introduced Jungkook, and by extension BTS and Hybe, to billions of people who had never listened to K-pop, never followed an idol, never engaged with Asian pop culture in any way. Soccer fans in Brazil, in Nigeria, in Germany, in Argentina, in Saudi Arabia, people who might never have encountered BTS through music industry channels, suddenly knew Jungkook's face, knew his voice, knew his name. That audience expansion was a strategic asset of incalculable value for Hybe's global growth ambitions. Now let's talk about Golden, because this is where Jungkook's solo commercial dominance reached its full, terrifying peak. Released on November 3, 2023, Golden was Jungkook's debut solo album, and its performance was the kind of commercial event that makes record label executives weep with joy. The album debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, an extraordinary achievement for any solo debut, let alone one by a Korean solo artist. It sold over 2 million copies in South Korea in its first week. It topped album charts in over 100 countries. Every track on the album charted on the Billboard Hot 100, flooding the chart with Jungkook songs in a way that demonstrated not just single-track appeal, but deep, album-wide commercial engagement. The lead single, Standing Next to You, was a masterpiece of pop positioning. A retro funk pop track with Michael Jackson-esque choreography. The song debuted at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became a global streaming juggernaut. The music video, with Jungkook delivering dance moves that drew direct comparisons to the king of pop himself, went massively viral and accumulated hundreds of millions of views. Standing Next to You demonstrated something that Hybe found incredibly valuable: Jungkook's ability to invoke the legacy of pop music's greatest icons without it feeling derivative. When he danced like Michael Jackson, it didn't feel like imitation, it felt like continuation. Like the torch had been passed. And that comparison, which was made not just by fans but by major music critics and industry publications, positioned Jungkook in a category that no other active K-pop artist occupies, the category of legitimate global pop royalty. Each one of them brings something to Hybe that no other human being on the planet can replicate. J-Hope's pioneering courage. Jin's effortless magnetism. Suga's architectural genius. RM's intellectual depth. V's atmospheric gravity. Jimin's emotional devastation. Jungkook's total completeness. Remove any one of them, and BTS is diminished. Remove any one of them, and Hybe loses a revenue stream, a creative dimension, a brand identity pillar, or a strategic capability that cannot be replaced by hiring, training, or acquiring another artist. That's the real reason Hybe sees these 7 men as priceless assets. Not because they're popular, popularity fades. Not because they're talented, talent is everywhere. But because they are irreplaceable. Each one occupies a role so specific, so deeply embedded in the BTS identity, and so uniquely tied to their individual journey, personality, and artistry that the cost of losing any one of them isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in identity. BTS without any single member isn't BTS. And Hybe without BTS isn't Hybe. 7 members. 7 reasons. 1 truth. They're not assets because they generate revenue. They generate revenue because they are, each and every one of them, genuinely priceless. And that right there is why Hybe doesn't just manage BTS, they protect them. Because in a world full of replaceable content, replaceable trends, and replaceable stars, these 7 men are the one thing Hybe knows they can never, ever replace. End.